on some big bucks today. I'll get on the track, big buck, and lay one down today. It's a big 10-4.
Welcome to another episode of the Adirondack Bucks and Beyond podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Stagger Gear. If you haven't yet, make sure you head on over to the Stagger Gear website where you'll find everything from their wool tracker jacket, their Apex Merino base layers, and even their 100% rag wool gloves and much more. Everything you need to keep you dry, warm, and comfortable for a long day's adventure in the woods. Be sure to enter our promo code ABB with any purchase made on the Stagger Gear website to get 10% off your order. That's promo code ABB for 10% off your order, all at www.staggergear.com. All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Adirondack Bucks and Beyond podcast. We actually have 3 of us tonight instead of just 2 of us or just solo. So I think we're going to pick up on, part 2 of what I started the other day. I was kind of telling about my season. It just kind of makes sense to have Brad here. Adam wasn't with us filming those days, but Brad was. So it makes sense to kind of add to the conversation to have him here. But yeah, we're going to talk about the rest of my season on snow and whatever else comes to our mind. So let's see. When was the first day we got on snow? Were you with me the first day we got on snow?
Nope. You hunted by yourself on that buck that took you on that gallivant all day long.
Okay, right. So that was, actually I'm editing that video right now. So that was November 30th, the last day of November. And this is the same area Brad killed his buck.
Yep. So the bulk of your tracking pretty much started after I killed my buck.
Yeah, because you killed your buck like right when we got back from Ohio, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was
the first day that we got snow, I killed my buck. Then we had Thanksgiving. The following day, we get him out, and then after that, you were hunting snow.
Corey and I had been on snow. One other day up in Uppatuppa. Yeah, we went up to Uppatuppa, and I'll just say it because obviously everybody knows about it by all the trucks we saw up there. I mean, it was the only place with snow that day, like literally the only place in the Adirondacks, and there were trucks lined all the way up and down the road. It was terrible. I don't even think I caught a buck track that day. But anyway, so Brad shoots his buck, and then, I really got my turn at tracking, and I started up at our tent camp, and let me think about how this day unfolded here. Okay, yeah, so Adam got a picture on a cell cam that he hung.
Yep.
And, this buck, I guess we can throw it up in the podcast here. This was a beautiful buck. Brad and I believe that we had it on camera last year. Probably like, a mile away from where we
just
had him
on the other side of the mountain.
Yeah. But just a beautiful buck. And Adam's like, well, I'm not going in there this morning. So anyone else want to go in there and pick that buck track up? And mind you, I'm coming off of like 2 days of being pretty sick. Corey and I had, I'm lying. My tracking started a couple days prior to that, but really not much was going on. And I ended up just wearing myself down and getting pretty sick. And this was kind of like my redemption day. And Adam shows me that picture, and he's like, go get him. He was like 3 miles back in there, and I'm like, hell yeah, like I'm gonna kill this buck today. So I get in there. The snow is like a foot deep, and it was a horrible walk back to that camera. It took me.
It's a mother to get back in.
Yeah, there. On bare grounds it's nothing, but when there's snow, when there's that much snow, it's like literally because no one had walked back there. Like the first half of the trail was plowed out by foot, and then nobody went any farther than that. Yeah. So I was literally plowing trail the rest of the way.
And I would assume you were probably really beating feet because you're motivated, right? Like you literally know there is a buck track where you're going, so I
had told you, I think the next day, this sounds so stupid, but I was walking in there and like I'm still like groggy and like kind of tired and like sick feeling, and I just started like punching my legs, and I'm like let's go, like there's a buck out there, like let's go, I gotta do this, and it kind of motivated me in a way, like oddly. So anyways, I get all the way back there, and waved to Adam on the camera. Adam has a picture of me standing in front of the camera. And I look down at this buck's track. I mean, we know what this buck is. He's a big, beautiful Adirondack buck, and he has a tiny track on him. Are you guys cutting out in one ear?
Yeah, losing one ear.
Damn it. Let's see. Is that better? No?
You want to set something underneath it?
Yeah, I think that is. Oh, there you go. Yeah, give me that.
Yeah.
Might work. How about, is that good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So I get back to this track, and it's tiny, but I'm like, all right, well, I know what it is, so I'm going to take it.
And he was the only track there?
He was the only track right there.
And I just want to quickly premise it with, this is not something we do regularly. This is the first time that I can recall where we have a buck on camera, we pick his track up. It's not like this is something we intended for. Or
Well, the crazy part is, like, we had, like, weird interactions with bucks and cameras this year on the track.
Yeah, we did.
And this day ties into it even further when I get down.
That's true. I forgot about that.
So I pick him up, and he immediately starts feeding. Immediately, like right after he goes by the camera, and I'm like, okay, like maybe he's still in this bed. So I creep for a ways. Well, my creep, I've told you guys, just telling you guys I have to work on it, because I think that's the biggest downfall of my tracking, is not being able to creep. And so I come up and I find feeding. Like, I just see a bunch of feeding sign right underneath this giant hemlock that was like right on the edge of this big bog. And I'm like, huh, that's weird. And I look, and there's a bed right next to the feeding under the hemlock, just looking over the entire swamp. And I'm like, oh, I wonder if I bumped him. Well, I look, and there's walking tracks out of that bed. And I'm like, oh, we got a little guest here. Hi, Maple. You gonna Brad's gonna take care of that.
Bye, Maple.
Bye, Maple. So anyways, I where was I? What did I just say? Oh yeah, I was at the hemlock. I found his bed, and he had walking tracks coming out of there, and I'm like, oh boy, like I left out. The buck went by your camera at 3 a.m.
Yeah,
and it's 5 hours later at this point. So now the buck's fed. He's laid down, and he's walked out of a bed from 3 a.m. until now, 5 hours later. So I'm like, he is really close. So I just kind of, at this point, I am really easing along, and I see he's like starting to make like a left-hand turn. He's going to go straight up this mountain, and he's like kind of like feeding along the way, and I'm like, well, he either got me already, or he's going to be waiting up here in a bed for me. So I climb up the mountain, and yep, he was up there. He was in his bed, and he was literally looking down over top of his back track right where I walked, and I bumped him out of his bed. So it's like, okay, well, now I have him fresh. Wish I could have got him in that bed, but oh well. And I take off after him, and he goes, he's straight line for probably like a mile and a half, probably like a mile before he started getting mixed into other deer, doing the normal jumping into other tracks and just total confusion. So at this point, he leads me to like a 4-way intersection, and there's like 6 different deer and like 2 different bucks, and their tracks are just going everywhere. And I'm like, he had such a small track. I told myself when I got on it, I'm like, if he gets mixed in with does, like, I'm screwed, because I'm not gonna be able to tell. He has such a small track.
Right.
So that happens, and I'm like, I don't know. I'm just gonna guess the way. Well, you told me, like, when we were tracking, you're like, you always have to imagine, like, what were they doing before? Like, what were they doing before? And then kind of gauge, like, okay, well, they're probably going to go like this then. And I'm like, so that's what I had in my head. Mm-hmm. Like, he's probably going to go like this, because this is how he was working before. So I took that track, and had no idea what deer I was on, obviously. And I just knew I was on a buck, and he kept jumping into other deer tracks still. So, I don't know, probably 2 miles later, it's getting on to be like, it's got to be like 2, 3 o'clock by this point. And finally, this deer starts slowing down. And I left the part out. I had bumped this deer out of one other bed, right above where it got mixed in with all those other tracks. There was a bed right up above them, like 150 yards, looking down at all those tracks. And I had bumped this deer out of there. Mm-hmm. So I finally catch back up. This deer's slowing down and takes finally a hard left turn. And now we've gone all the way around the mountain here. I picked this buck up on the backside of the mountain near our tent, and it has gone literally all the way around the mountain back towards the parking lot. And it takes a left, like it's going to go over top of the mountain back towards the trail, and starts feeding again. And I'm like, oh my God, this deer's right here. So I start creeping, and in the video you like hear like some twigs like brush off the GoPro and stuff, and then I stop for whatever reason, and you just hear crashing, and this buck ended up being bedded right down to the left of me. There was like a giant like boulder or rock, and he like was right down in front of it. And I don't know if he heard me or what the deal was, but I heard a bunch of crashing, and by the time I saw him, he was like way away, like probably like 150 yards away, running to the right. And I just saw his legs going. I didn't really get a good look at him, but in the video you could just see him dart by, and like I raised my gun up and then it's gone. So I'm like, all right, now I'm running out of time here. Like it's 2:30, 3 o'clock, and I just bumped this deer again. He's gonna go. So he ends up going down the mountain, across the trail, and he brings me past this swamp, and now we're into wide open hardwoods. And the entire time, I'm moving on this deer because I'm like, time's against me here, and there's, at the time, what I thought was private. It's not private that I know now, but I thought it was private land, and I'm like, he's going to run right down on that private land. So I'm moving along. He brings me around like two big swamps, and now he's heading down into like this, like these big hardwood drainages. And I get to this one spot. There's like a little knob out in front of me, and then it drops down into this like basically like a drainage. And up to the left, there's another like little knob. And I just crept up the knob, and I stood there for a second. And I'm like, he's got to be right here. Like I know he's right here somewhere. Like where is he? And I just catch a little like movement out of the left-hand corner of my eye, and like 120, probably like 120 yards. I just look, and he's bounding again. He got me again. He was standing up on that knob, watching his back trap. He hadn't even bedded down or anything yet by this point, and he saw me and just took off. And by the time I raised up like this, and I just see his rack, and he's just poof, there he goes. He's gone. Right. I picked up my scope, and he was gone, and I set it back down, and he starts blowing at me. I have the GoPro rolling, and you could hear him blowing at me and stuff. So that was that. That was super disappointing. At this point, it was like 4 o'clock. I bumped him again. I mean, this is the fifth time I've bumped this buck. Fifth time I've bumped this buck. And it's getting dark, and I'm like, there's no shot. Like, there's no shot. So then the next day, I decided we were going to go back into the same area, but this time Brad came with me. And I'm trying to think. We went the opposite. Yeah, so we went opposite direction of where I picked that buck up the day prior. And I think you had said, let's go up on – didn't you recommend to go up on that mountain that day?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. There's just a mountain that we really hadn't spent much time on. And
I would just presume it's pretty overlooked because of its location.
Yeah. And we had bumped some does around, headed up there and whatnot. So we get up there, and there was a ton of feeding sign and a ton of tracks up there. And Brad and I picked this track up, and immediately I noticed, I'm like, look how crooked his track was. I mean, his track was like that.
Yeah.
It was so lopsided. And I'm like, oh my, and it's obviously a buck track. I'm like, this is perfect. And then I see antler marks in the snow, and I'm like, all right, this is the one we're following today.
And he was pretty darn fresh.
Oh,
and
yeah,
we would come to
smoking.
realize that he was really fresh at the time, which wasn't a surprise. We knew he was.
Right.
Compared to the tracks around him.
Right. So now I'm pumped up. And, I keep leaving stuff out. The camera thing, I meant to mention, the day prior, I have a camera up on the mountain that I was tracking this buck. Mm-hmm. This buck went by my camera and literally skirted it by 20 yards.
Yeah.
Like, my camera's here, and he just went out of the field of view because I checked it. I'm like, what the fuck? But, so that happened. And so this next day, Brad and I are tracking this buck, and we thought we were pretty close. We did a lot of sneaking. It was Brad can attest of how hard it is for me to sneak on a buck.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this buck we picked him up on the top of this mountain, right where we figured we'd pick a buck track up, and he was headed right down towards a beaver pond where I happen to have a camera, and I and past seasons have tracked bucks down to this same beaver pond, and they like to bed in all the blowdowns along the pond, and he looks to be like he's going to do that exact same
Right.
Cookie cutter movement that all these other bucks have done. I mean, he's headed right towards this pond off the mountain.
Yeah.
And he's super fresh, so it seems like he's probably going to go lay down along this pond.
Yeah.
So that's why we started sneaking.
And he'd been feeding a ton.
Right, and he'd been feeding
ton.
a lot. It honestly seemed like it was going to be a done deal. Not as far as shooting him, but we just thought for sure
we'd catch him.
Catch up with him,
Yeah.
whether we bumped him or saw him.
So we're heading up into this bedding area, sneaking, and I finally get to the top, and I'm looking down through, and I'm just like, he's not here.
Mm-hmm.
So Brad's like, wow, he's going like right towards my camera. And so we keep going. I mean, this buck walks directly by Brad's camera, like 10 yards in front of it. And I have a card reader with me, and I'm like, sweet, let's go.
Mm-hmm.
So I pop it in, and it doesn't work. Never couldn't see it. I'm like, oh, you got to be kidding me. Whatever. So.
And it seems silly that we keep talking about these bucks like walking by cameras. Like the one you tracked the first day goes by a camera, and then later on he goes by Adam's camera first, then he goes by another one of your cameras. And I don't really know what to say other than it's just sheer luck. I mean, these cameras are out in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of these mountains. I mean, this particular piece is like, I don't even know, maybe 200,000 acres.
Gigantic.
It's ginormous.
It's one of the bigger pieces in the Adirondack.
Yes, it is, and it just so happens. It sounds so silly to even, and I know what's going on here, but to hear us say how these bucks keep walking by cameras, I can't make this up. I don't know. I mean, the camera that mine was on, that's just a game trail. The moose use it, the deer use it. It's just.
I told you not to put one there this year. Remember?
It's really not a good spot. I've gotten some pictures on it in the past, and for what it's worth, I mean, the buck walked right by it, and we ended up later on realizing we did get it. It just wasn't working on the card reader.
Right.
I plugged it in at home, and we had the buck on it, but I think I got like 16 pictures on that camera all year long. So I just want to put into
So
perspective.
happens.
Right. It just so happens this buck walked right by it.
Yeah, and so now that we're talking about that, we were, 2 hours behind that buck?
Yeah, we were before we were sneaking on him, we were about an hour behind him.
Right.
If you take into account we snuck for about 50 minutes, that puts us 2 hours behind him.
Right.
And then that's where we were for about the rest of the day. Well,
so
till the middle of the day, then we catch back up
right.
to him.
So we are just so close to this buck, really.
Yep.
And so we go beyond Brad's camera, and we get down into like I mean, it's just the edge of a swamp, and it's
he just
thicker
keeps
than
hugging this beaver pond. He's just hugging it. He's going in and out of the spruces, and he's acting like he's trying to look for a place to lay down. And
he's just doing like weird stuff because he's like he's coming into these doe beds and smelling these doe beds and getting in these doe tracks, and then he's stopping and just standing there and feeding, and then he's jumping over logs and bounding.
He
and
wasn't acting like he was looking for does. He acted like he was just checking out the area, feeding, checking a couple doe beds because he could probably smell them. But it wasn't like he was straight lining on a mission. He was really poking around in there.
I just kept saying to you, I'm like, I don't know what to even make of this right now. I don't know what this buck's doing. And so ends up he must have been he spent so much time in there that we end up bumping him, right? I mean, we presume that we bumped him out of there.
Yeah, definitely.
And so we bump him. We're like, all right, well, we got him fresh. And Brad and I sat down, had lunch, and we're like, all right, here we go. We're going back on him. And he runs down across this drainage, finally gets out of there, up into some hardwoods, and now he's really climbing the mountain. Like, he's going straight up the mountain.
Yeah.
To where you had shot at a buck earlier and bumped and saw another really nice buck.
Yeah, if you recall from my podcast, I talked about jumping 2 different bucks on wicked crunchy snow, crunchy ice. Well, he's headed up the same mountain, and we crossed over one of the pins I dropped that day.
Yeah.
For the first buck that I bumped. So this is obviously an area that bucks travel through.
So Brad and I are like, money. Like, he's going up to where known bucks have bedded before.
I mean, we walked on the pin.
Yeah, on the pin.
We didn't miss it. We walked on it.
So, and as we're going up the mountain, I pointed out to Brad, I said, look how short his stride is getting. Like, it looked like he was going to slow down. Like, everything was telling us that he was going to slow down. So, it's getting on. It was probably like 2:30 at this point.
Yeah, and the snow was getting better too. It had really loosened up, and it was deadly.
And it started, yeah, because it was well, not yet, but it started to rain later on, and So we're going, and he hits this bench like 3/4 of the way up, and we're directly on this finger. He hits this bench, and he just starts going. Like he wasn't moving along very fast at all at first when he was climbing up that finger. Hits this bench and just goes. And I'm like, man. So now Brad and I are like, we're moving along, but keeping an eye out on the track. And it gets to like 3:00, and you remembered you had to peel off because you had a family obligation.
Mm-hmm.
And I told Brad, I'm like, I'm staying on this thing till dark. Like I have to.
Oh, yeah.
Because I know he's right here. So Brad drops off. And I just start like booking it, and actually we ran back into each other.
Yeah,
you
we
were
did.
Brad. I don't remember how that. Oh yeah, I caught you moving down below me, and I started
it's
whistling.
funny how the lay of the land works. Sometimes you feel like you're like I was going down the mountain, but really I was kind of paralleling it.
Yeah.
And we ran right back into
Yeah,
each other
I
again.
think at one point I said in the GoPro because I was moving so fast. I'm like, I'm gonna beat Brad back to the vehicle at this rate. But so then Brad really dumps off the side of the mountain, and I mean, it is wide open. Again, I have a buck in wide open hardwoods, and I'm like, this is what you want. Like this is what I want right now. This is great.
Yeah.
So I'm going and going and going and going, and he's just not stopping. And at this point, we're almost back to the parking lot again. Like we're headed right back towards the parking lot, almost to where that buck was the day before.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, this buck just takes an immediate right-hand turn. Like he had been going, I don't know, a mile and a half, just straight line, and then it's just a wicked hard right-hand turn. I'm like, he's going to be better right here. I take like 10 steps. I look to my left, and again, there's a giant boulder, and this buck just bedded right behind this giant boulder. Literally, like I don't even know what he's looking at. Must have been facing like up the mountain the way he was bedded. I'm like, that makes no sense. But I look, and it's like, kind of like trotting tracks out of the bed, but not running or anything. Like I bumped them really hard, so I'm like, well, that's kind of weird. And at this point now it's like 4:00, almost 4:00, and I'm like, okay, I'm literally going to run on this deer. So I take off running, and I'm like, I'm gonna catch him in these hardwoods. At one point I'm standing there looking down at where I didn't know at this point, but looking down at where I bumped him, and I never saw him. I never saw this buck, and I don't know how, but I keep going, and I come to feeding sign, and I look, and there's running tracks going out of the feeding sign, and he is headed straight back up the mountain at like 4:00, and it's getting dark. But yeah, I never end up seeing that buck. If you guys are watching a YouTube video, I'll put the picture in here of him that we got on the trail camera that day.
Yeah, yep.
But yeah, those were my two best days of tracking this year, and the closest I came to, catching a buck, because all the other days I tracked were basically just wash days. I couldn't get on anything, and if I did, I mean, Brad was with me a couple days, and bucks were just going and going and going and getting into does, and we could not make it happen.
Nope.
So
Nope.
that was basically my season on the snow.
Yeah, I mean, our third day tracking, we tracked that buck that took us way up into the top of that mountain. Remember, the snow was like 12, 14 inches deep up there.
Oh yeah.
And he got with a doe. It was just one of those mysterious, scenarios in tracking where all of a sudden a doe just appeared with him in the track.
Right.
It was the strangest thing. It was like he was all by himself, and then all of a sudden it's like there's two deer here. Unless he had been walking in her tracks step for step for a long time. But anyways, he picked up a doe, and she took him right up into this hellhole rock slide mess of spruce and everything else, aspen or whatever the hell else was up in there. It was all about 8 foot right next to each other. I mean, there was no way we were going to catch these deer up in this mountain, and they wanted to go off the backside, and that was going to take us out into like God's country. And we were already about 3 miles in at that point. We were like, maybe we'll just swing another couple miles out to the right or left and not bury ourselves over
I don't
the
even know if we
backside of
could.
this
I don't even
mountain.
know if we could have gone through that.
Well, that was the
stuff.
thing too. We didn't really know what the backside of the mountain was gonna look like. It's like, man, if we get all the way, and this was a big mountain. If we
was
get all
like-
the way down to the bottom side of this, man, we're gonna be back.
It's
in
one of
here
those
for the
mountains where
day.
you look at the map and it's like the lines are all like this all the way up, and they're like
Right, the topo lines are just like touching each other, right? And he just didn't feel like a catchable buck because we picked his track up right as we got on the trail, just a couple hundred yards from the truck, and I mean we went for about 3
It
straight
was fairly
miles.
fresh.
Oh, he was very
Yeah.
fresh, and we went for about 3 straight miles of him just absolutely getting it. I mean, he didn't even stop to
Well, there was
take
one
a
point.
breath.
Well, there was one point where, and I want to talk about this after because we have talked about this a sneaking thing, but we came to where I think it was just a matter of he literally just ran headfirst into this blowdown, and he started feeding on the blowdown. And then he just took a hard right after he did that.
Yeah.
And I remember I looked back at the camera. I'm like, he's right here. Like, we're going to see this buck. And I start creeping and creeping and creeping. And we never see him.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I just get, the thing about creeping for me is like, yes, you can creep and obviously it works for a ton of people. But like, I feel like the majority of times that I've crept on bucks, that is what happens to me. I creep and I creep and I creep, and then they're never there.
Right.
So it's like,
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can't think of the creep as like the creep is you're going to kill the buck every time you creep. You're going to creep a lot over the years, and he's just not going to be there. But there's times you're going to creep, and he is going to be there.
yeah,
And I mean, the best thing you can do is, and I hate to always just reference Donito, but I mean, a lot of the stuff that Joe says to me in my 4 years of learning tracking and everything, and having some success along the way, and having some really close calls, is I can agree with a lot of things he says because I can put myself at a time and place where that's what happened.
Right.
And Joe just says, sneak on him, recognize that he's not there, and get back on the track. And that's all we did. So we snuck on him for a bit. I mean, this buck straight line for a long time, what had happened was it had been like sleeting rain that night. And some of the limbs got really heavy, and some of these spruce limbs and stuff that had old man's beard on them had fallen down.
yes,
And he ran right into one and started feeding on the old man's beard. So it just made sense, and we were at the top of the mountain at this point. So it just made sense that he was going to lay down.
Yeah.
So we snuck on him for a bit, and it just became eerily obvious because it just felt quiet. It felt like he wasn't there.
yeah.
And we realized that, and we picked his track back up. Sure enough, he had kept going. And actually what had happened was right down below us, just a bench below us, maybe 100 yards, he had
ran.
come into a bunch of deer.
He came into a bunch of deer, and oh, man,
And I want
hate
to
that.
I want to clarify too, and you made me think of it when you talked about how I've said to you before this year, and it seems to have stuck with you because you brought it up a couple times now. But when I told you, like, well, what was he doing before this?
Yeah.
Before
No,
we
it
got-
has stuck with me.
Because it's whether he brings you into a barnyard or he brings you into like a classic situation is he brings you into a beaver meadow that's got swale grass that's 4 or 5 feet high. Well, the snow gets all stuck up in that swale grass, so you don't really see his print anymore.
Right.
You kind of just see disturbances and where the snow fell and stuff, and sometimes you'll lose his track, and it's like, well, last time when we came into this swale grass, he was headed dead, right towards maybe let's say like that log over there, and you walk over towards that log. Well, he'd been going that way the entire time.
Right.
So you don't have to. Guys, got to remember, you don't have to track him step for step.
Right.
You just got to track the direction that he's headed.
Yeah, and the other thing that you said is like the still hunting thing. Like, yes, you are tracking a deer. Like, that is what you're doing. You're tracking a deer. You're following his print in the snow. But what you're really doing is tracking to the point where you still hunt.
Right. You're tracking. Yes, you're tracking him to the area that he is at that very point in time.
Right.
I think a lot of people, and myself included, when I first started tracking, was that you get on the track and you walk until you bump right into his butt.
Right, which is what I
there he
do, I
is.
think.
Yeah, that's not how it works.
Right.
You track him until your instincts and your experience tell you, I'm
right
with
here.
it. Right. He's within, like Donito would say, he's within 100 yards, 150 yards. Now we start hunting him.
Yeah.
Where we use all of our senses, all of our experience, and that's when you try to kill these bucks. And but again, you got to become your own hunter. I shouldn't say again because I haven't referenced it yet, but you have to become your own hunter because we'll talk to our buddy Adam Arquette, who we've had on the podcast twice, and Adam sneaks, don't get me wrong, but Adam would be the first one to tell you that he's a pretty aggressive tracker.
Right.
He kind of is going to track right up to the point where he feels like he's getting close, and then he's more of a get ready with his gun guy.
Right.
And he just keeps moving. He knows at any second that buck's going to take off, bound or whatever, and he's right on him, and he's going to start shooting.
Which is like...
And that's how he's comfortable.
Which is my mentality of it. Like, that's how I feel like my mentality towards tracking is. But the problem is it hasn't worked.
Well, until
it
you
hasn't
start...
worked for me.
Yeah, and now it works for Adam, 100%. But until you start bumping these bucks in the big woods and you see how fast it's just a flash before your eyes and it's over with, you realize that it's pretty difficult to shoot bucks like that. It really is best to get to where you're within range of them and start taking your time and try to catch them making that mistake, whether he's just feeding out in front of you or he's messing around with does, or like my buck, he was kind of just poking around looking at doe tracks, just being a dummy.
Yeah.
Out in the wide open hardwoods, and I caught him with his pants down, so to speak. So that that's what tracking really comes down to.
Yeah. I mean,
in my opinion.
At this point now, I've caught up, and this is kind of referencing back to like that. They're there and then they're gone, like a flash like that. I've caught up now to like, I don't know, $5 on the track now. I think I've actually laid eyes on the track. It's other than the one that just stood in the guy's backyard at his camp.
Yeah.
Basically all of them were like, they're there and then they're gone like that. And it's like, how do I even like I need, that's why I need to get better at the sneaking thing, because I need to get that moment where they have no idea what's going on. Like, even if it's just that split 5 seconds, I could get that extra look at them and get a bead on them. Because right now, what it is for me is just that. It's they see me, they hear me, boom, I just see them going.
Right.
And it was the same thing, actually, when I tracked in Vermont last year. I got on a really nice buck track. And these deer were so tired. So tired. And all they wanted to do is lay down. And if I had just been a little more patient and was able to sneak better, I definitely would have got a shot at them, because I caught up to these deer like 4 or 5 different times.
Sure.
But it's that sneaking aspect that just screws me.
Yeah, you just can't convince yourself that sneaking is a waste of your time, or that he's putting time on me, or he's not here. Well, don't go by the hypotheticals.
Yeah.
He's not there when you know he's not there. Not because you think he isn't.
Right.
When you go 100 yards on him and it's pretty darn clear that the facts are telling you he's not there anymore, okay, pick your pace back up a little bit.
A little bit.
It doesn't mean take right back off, but and like we talked about a lot in the woods, for me, slowing down and sneaking, it just doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me. Like, I want to do that. I want to slow down. When we start moving fast, I start feeling weird. I feel like we're going too fast. But for you, and you know this, like, it eats at you to slow down. You just don't
You see
want
it. You
to
can
do
see it in my eyes when I'm.
Well, I mean, dude, your sneak is like not even remotely a sneak. I mean, your sneak is like step.
I know, dude.
Step, and it's just still a lot of movement. If he's just laying there in his bed chewing his cud, that's a lot of movement.
I know.
When it's dead quiet out and he's on high alert.
Really, really funny you brought that up. The movement thing. I was just scrolling through the old Tic Tac last night. And
That'll get you.
Yeah, it actually. Listen, there's some interesting stuff on TikTok. I don't care what anybody says. I don't care if the Chinese are up to it or not. There's some interesting stuff on there.
I don't have it.
It was how deer's vision works. And it was like talking about all the cones in their eyes, how they can see. I think it's 300 degrees around their head.
Right.
They can see, and they only like our eyes are able to focus on certain things. Like they can change. Our eyes can change focus.
Sure.
But deer's eyes are I think mainly focused on the horizon.
They're just set at a 2 power, Adam.
Yeah,
they're just a fixed 2 power.
Yeah. But seriously, they have a fixed focus in their eyes to where it's only on the horizon.
Yeah.
And they only pick, like, that's why they pick up on movement so well.
Right.
Like, he was going in and explaining it. It was just super, super interesting. But yeah, when a deer's laying down in his bed and their sense is to pick up on movement, and I'm moving like I am through the woods like that, like, yeah, no shit, they pick up on me moving.
And I mean, again, I like I said to you before, your instincts are there. You
Right.
know when he's going to be there. You know when you're getting close. It's just a matter of honing those skills.
Yeah.
I mean, we've all talked about when we first started tracking. Well, I didn't know my ass from my head. You know,
Right.
I didn't know if I was right about what I was
Right.
feeling or if I'm close from not. Well, I feel much differently these days. It doesn't mean that I certainly don't kill every buck that I track, but I feel much more confident that what I'm seeing and what I'm feeling is the correct move for that point in time. And again, you have those up and downs all days. And Hal always says, I'm going to get him, I'm not going to get him. I'm going to
Right.
get him, I'm not going
Which
to get
is
him.
so true.
And the not going to get him is an overwhelming feeling because there's a lot of times you just know.
Right.
He's just bringing me into a spot. This is not going to work. I mean, when
Right.
that buck was bringing you up the mountain,
I
like,
knew-
yeah,
yeah.
no kidding he was going to have a bet up there.
Right.
You knew he was.
I knew he was.
You knew
I
he
knew
was.
he was.
And so sometimes it's just best to just keep hunting them, be careful, be on alert and be observative, but know that this particular jump probably is not going to work out. And there's just some bucks, dude, you can just feel it all day. You're like, I'm never going to get this buck.
Keep setting up on you.
Mhm.
Just
They
keep setting
do.
up on
And
you.
then there's certain bucks you're on, and all day you're just like, oh, this feels different than the tracks I've been on this year or tracks in the past. This one feels right.
Yeah.
And usually they, in some form or fashion, are a better hunt than you've been on.
Which the one, the one that we got on trail camera I followed, I felt like that all day. Like, and even the one that we were on, I thought I was going to catch up with him and get a shot at him.
Yeah.
But like the one the day before, I was like, he's laid down 3 times now. Like, he's tired. He's been rutting. Like, he's tired, and I can catch up to this buck. But one thing, and you made me think of it, like, one thing I am proud of is that each season that goes along, even though I haven't killed a buck on the track, every year I feel like I'm 10 steps further than I was the season before.
Absolutely.
Like, I took so much away, and it was awesome having you on the track with me because, look, I mean, there is stuff, like, obviously that you said that really stuck with me, and you've been way more successful than I have on the track. So I'm like, I've just picked up on all these other little things, and I'm like, okay, next year, like, game over. Like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna kill one on the
Yeah,
track.
dude.
Not that I don't know. Who knows? Maybe it's gonna take me 8 years before I kill one on the track. But I just keep learning so much every single time I get on the track.
Yeah, and the best part about tracking is you're getting that real time experience and that real time feedback. I mean, dude, you could sit in a tree stand for weeks on end and you never get any feedback because you
Right.
don't know if you were ever close or you weren't.
Right.
Tracking, you know exactly how close you were or were not, and you get to watch that game film
yeah.
in between your ears all the way home, and
Yep.
you just replay it and think about that. You immediately know what you should have done different.
Yeah, that is funny you say that because
Yeah.
every time I do something on the track, like if I'm sitting in a tree stand or like doing something, I'm like, oh man, maybe I should have been here, maybe I should have done this. But on the track, you always know, like, I shouldn't have done that, or no, that was the right move. Like, he just beat me there. That is the cool thing about tracking. And I was listening to Bo Martonic and Zach on THP, and they were talking about tracking. And they're like, man, tracking is so cool because you're constantly getting, like, just a play-by-play of what a deer is doing
Yeah.
in his normal day.
Yeah.
Like, you are constantly seeing what that deer is doing in his everyday life. And like, you don't just get it like through a trail camera or like you watch a deer for a second. Like, you're following him all day long sometimes, and sometimes multiple deer.
Yeah.
Like, it's so cool.
Yeah, I think all the time, and I thought it a couple times this year. Not necessarily because my tracking season ended fairly quickly as far as me being on
Yeah.
the gun, but that was the best part about being with you is I got to spend a lot of time, and for all intents and purposes, I was tracking right there with you. I mean,
Yeah.
you were the one that was going to shoot, but I got to be part of it, and I
Right.
got to have my own thoughts while we were doing it, and we had a lot of great conversations. But I just remember thinking on more than one occasion, I would never still hunt the path that he took through this mountain, or I would never still hunt the way that he just navigated these ponds right here.
Right.
I would hunt this pond. I do hunt this pond, so
Right.
I have a camera there, but I wouldn't have navigated it or walked the way that he did. And I think what's really important to keep in mind is that their size difference is.
Bianca just bought some cookies down here. Let's go.
My wife's sneaking in behind the camera. Thank you, honey.
Thank you, Bianca.
Thank you, Bianca.
Oh gosh, I don't need any of those. I think we have to keep in mind that I'm standing 6 foot tall, as are you for the most part.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about an animal that's more. What do you got, Adam? What are you shooting, brother?
Yeah, what do you got over there?
5'8", 5'9".
5'8", 5'9". Okay, you're getting
Yeah.
there. You're almost about yeah.
Average.
You're a tall buck. They see the woods differently. They see different holes in the woods differently than we do. Where I would walk is because that to my eye level looks like something I can navigate. To him, it all looks very different.
Yeah. Another thing that on the way over, I just got thinking about. I'm like, I wonder if like I tell you all the time, like I've seen this time and time and time again of a buck jumping into tracks, like especially if he knows he's being followed, like him jumping into tracks. But like even if he's just like chasing does around, like he gets in their tracks, and I'm like, that's so crazy because like they do that on bear ground too, and it's not off sight. I don't think it's just strictly off their nose.
Yeah.
Of them getting in those tracks. I don't know. It was just weird. I was thinking about it on the way over.
Yeah,
like,
and I know Rodney Elmer likes to talk a lot about those kangaroo bucks, like those young bucks that just seem to be kangarooing all over the mountain. And it's a great analogy for it because it really is what they do. And I don't remember particularly what buck me and you hunted together, but I remember just thinking like, this is one of them kangaroo bucks.
Yeah.
What's he doing this for? Like he's running for weird reasons. And it might have been that buck that went by my camera, but he kept running for weird reasons, and he was like changing course with it seemed like no real intention in mind. And that's all I could think was like, well, we're definitely not on a big like mature hog.
Yeah.
Because this buck's acting like a goofball. But
he wasn't a mature hog. He was. No,
he wasn't. He's maybe a
cookie cutter 8.
Yeah, he's a 3.5-year-old cookie cutter 8.
I would have driven.
Oh,
that
he's beautiful.
7mm 08.
He was a beautiful
right
buck, but yeah, just his the things he was doing just didn't really add up to something that an 8-year-old buck does.
There was one point where Brad and I were down on the edge of the swamp, Adam, and this buck, there's like this blowdown, like I don't know, like this wide, and there's like a bunch of shit like hanging down over top of it, and this buck jumped like right through all this stuff, and I'm like, they're following a spike horn right now. There's no way this thing has a rack on its head.
Yeah.
But it's not like he was a tiny buck. But.
No, he was probably like he's like a 13, 14-inch wide 8-pointer. He wasn't a withy buck. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah,
he didn't have great width, but he had nice tall tines on him.
Yeah. Now the buck I followed the day before was a hog, and
that's a big
he
buck.
did not do anything. Like maybe there was a couple times where he like went through like some tight stuff, but like this buck for the most part was out in the open hardwoods, like avoiding stuff, and he had a rack on his head. So
yeah, and that's exactly it.
Yeah. What about you, Adam? What did your
you spent a fair amount of time on snow this year?
Yeah, you got on snow.
Yeah, I tried every
October.
chance I had, pretty much.
I mean, what did you pick up from tracking this year? Because this was the most you've ever spent on snow, or what's something that like kind of you've thought about quite a bit after the season, or something you're looking forward to next year to try.
Going from last year to this year, I knew I needed to pick up my pace from the time you pick up the track. Picking up the track and then getting on it to freshen them up. Mm-hmm. I knew I needed to pick my pace up there, which I did do. Got a couple opportunities. That day that you shot into yours was absolutely wild.
Yeah.
That day, because there was a bed with a bunch of blood in it, which ended up being a doe with a super big buck track, and it had snowed that night, so you knew it was smoking.
Absolutely.
That's the best.
So I hung with him all day until I had to come rescue you.
Yep.
And then he took me all over that mountain and past camp, the whole 9.
Yeah.
And he never slowed down. He just stayed with that doe all damn day.
That's a good observation, though, dude. I mean, that's an easy one to overlook. Like, sometimes half the battle is just realizing that you got to move on a track when you first find it. And it really is, what's the word I'm looking for? It's escaping me right now. But you do kind of want to, as soon as you see the track, be like, okay, like start on my foot. And like, I know he's here somewhere, but he's not. He's a long ways away, typically.
In reality, with where I picked that track up and where that bed was, it was fairly fresh. Maybe I should have even been taking my time as I dropped down into that area. On
You
the
never
trail.
jumped him, though.
I don't believe I jumped him, but there was a bed there with running tracks going out of it. But that being said, that buck was because I was checking out what he was doing.
It was a buck's bed, and he ran
no,
out of it, or the
I
doe?
never found the buck's bed. There was a doe's bed
so he must have
there,
just bumped her out
and
of there.
he had been circling her for several laps until I don't know if he.
Isn't that something?
That's so funny.
That's interesting. Yeah.
She stayed put. I never once found her track except for when she got up and got moved.
Not interesting to hear that because we know bucks do that, but just to see that,
Yeah,
that's
he was
really
just doing
cool.
laps around, and he made a hook in there, and then they moved, and he stayed with that doe all day long. He took me into several little spots where there's, other deer had been, and he stayed with her.
Sure.
It was as easy to track her because you knew he was going to be right with her the whole way.
Yeah, and I just want to say one thing because you just reminded me of it. I want to go back one more time to when we talked about what was he doing before when you come into a barnyard. Or when you think of a barnyard, just consider the fact that it's unlikely he ran into other deer literally making that barnyard.
Right.
It's more likely that he came into the deer's tracks after they had been there. That's why it's important to think about where he's going because he's not horsing around with those deer. He's going to work it over and then continue on that path that he was on. It's rare that a buck's going to run right into a group of deer like that. He's usually already with him. It wouldn't surprise me if you follow all their tracks and find a barnyard.
Yes.
That would make sense.
So that was probably one of the more exciting parts of my season was just following him.
And I think we got to look at his track, right? When we came back through camp.
He had a pretty nice hoof on him.
Yeah, he had a nice track on him.
And so I hunted up there a few days, put some time in, and then I needed to change the scenery, so I took a ride and went into an area I've never been in before.
Way up
north. It was absolutely beautiful.
Good snow, right?
Oh, it was fluffy, beautiful snow. And I took this little trail. I was only going to hunt for probably half a day unless I found something crazy. And I hiked in about 1.5 miles, 2 miles, and got off the trail and just was going to do a big loop. And cut a decent buck track, but it was pretty old. But I was going to stay with it, so I stayed with it. Went through all this big, huge Christmas tree swamp down by a river, and I worked my way along that edge, and it actually brought me into another set of tracks that were smoking fresh. And it was definitely a doe with definitely a smaller buck track, but it was late in the season, and my finger was getting itchy. So I'm like, I'm going to jump off this one and stay with this guy. He's fresh and see how it goes. And I bumped them immediately. So I sat down and actually gave them, I want to say I gave them probably 40 minutes. Because it was so early in the morning and I knew I had so much time that I really wanted them to settle down. And with how the snow was, it was super quiet. Sneaking was not an issue, so I'm like, I'm gonna give him plenty of time, see if they'll even settle back down. And followed their track, and they made it wasn't a super hard hook. But it was a real gentle hook, and they were heading right up this little slope. And I looking ahead, and it was right on the edge of where the Christmas trees met the hardwoods. They were up in the hardwoods, looking down into the Christmas trees where I was, and there was a gigantic spike horn just staring at me, sitting in his bed.
Oh no!
Yeah, but dude, that's a win.
Yeah, that's
a win.
That I felt great about because I'm like, I did it.
Yeah, right.
Could I have piled him?
Sure.
Yeah. Should you have piled him?
Should I have? Looking back, absolutely. But we'll try again next year on him. See if we can go back in there and find him.
Yeah, man, that's as good a track as you could ask for.
Yeah. I don't know if last year I would have been confident enough to jump off that track.
Right.
I may have stayed with him with that original buck.
Mm-hmm. And it worked out the way you thought it would. You knew he wasn't as nice a track,
just with
but
the
you
way
knew it was fresher.
With the way the snow was,
it
was so blatantly obvious that it was fresh.
Yeah, I've never really been one to analyze tracks, mostly just due to my inexperience. I kind of just look at a track and it either looks fresh to me or it's not. But this year, I don't remember what day it was we were tracking, but we were watching the track deteriorate pretty darn quickly. And I started.
The day we ran into Isaac.
It must have been, yeah. And I started becoming really interested in the melt that happens on the outer edges of the track.
Yep.
Right.
And
Yes.
yeah, and Hal always says how crisp it is when it's fresh and how it becomes rounded pretty quickly when it's aging. And that I got to see that a couple times on my own boot tracks this year, like in different stages too, hour, 3 hours, 5 hours. And that rounding really does tell a lot about how fresh that track is.
Yeah.
It really does.
And something it's kind of easier for me to pick up on if the deer's dragging his feet. When it leaves that drag mark, that I feel like that's the easiest thing to pick out of the melt.
Sure.
Would you agree? Like when you look at the track, instead of looking at the track, if you look at that drag mark, usually they'll look like you said, like a nice crisp, like you could tell they just ran their hoof through there.
Sure.
And if not, it looks like it reminds me of like a half pipe.
Yeah.
When it melts out, it looks like a rounded half pipe when it starts to melt out.
I think it's just an aspect of what you should look at, but that's a big one.
Yeah.
I just I know there was a couple times that we were on tracks that they were fresh in the sense that the buck was only maybe 2 or 3 hours ahead of us. It wasn't like this was a 3-day-old track. But if you look at it from the naked eye, just standing over top of it, it looks pretty darn fresh. But if you really get down there and look at it, it might even feel packy in the bottom. Like it feels fresh.
Right.
You really look at it, it's got some rounded melt to it, and that says a lot, man. At least tells you maybe I should go hard for another mile, and then we'll reevaluate the track.
Man, judging tracks, especially like. Especially when there's a lot of snow and it's been like kind of melting out for like 2 days, like 3 days, like kind of what we ran into up on that gigantic mountain there. Like it is just so hard. Like even when you see that, it's so hard to tell what's fresh and what's not.
Yeah, I just think it's important to keep in mind not to turn this friggin' tracking thing into rocket science for anybody that's listening. And I know one of the big things right now, and I have my opinion on it, and I think it's important. But I hear a lot of thermal hub talk, and I think thermal hubs definitely play a factor. But dude, it's like people are starting to they're like connecting X and Y. I need that like those TikTok reels of like people thinking and there's like algebra math coming out of their head.
Right.
Like you don't overthink it like that. Just hunt the buck. Just track the buck down and kill him. You're gonna understand the track as you're going along. Your experience will help you, and your instincts will help finish the job.
So I feel like here's the thing. Here's my thoughts on like the whole thermal hub and like any like. Just real deep thought about deer in general is I think like people like Corey. Corey is the perfect example. Yeah, he loves hunting. Loves chasing down bucks, putting his tag around a buck. But a huge part of the chase for Corey is knowing the science behind deer.
Oh yeah.
Like that is the chase for him.
Corey is a huge why person.
Yes, like why does this happen?
Yep.
Like, why did the deer do that? He traveled here because he probably traveled here because the thermals were dropping down at this time, and like that is Corey to a T. And there's a lot of people. There's super curious people. Other people like Bo Martonic, Zach Farrenball. Like they're all grouped into like the same thing. They're all like the why people.
Yes.
I'm not.
I
love listening to it.
Yeah, I actually enjoy listening to Corey talk about it because I don't look into it, so I get my information through him on these trends, I guess you could say almost.
Right.
And it is interesting. It's interesting. And do I think bucks use thermal hubs? I absolutely do.
Oh yeah.
I think they're definitely a real thing, and I think bucks absolutely factor them into their game plan on a regular basis. But for me personally, I'm just going to hunt these bucks. I'm not going to worry about if I'm in a thermal hub or if I'm above the thermal hub. I just think for me, it's making it too hard.
So like, don't get me wrong. There are certain things like nowadays that I think, like I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but there's definitely new information out there now that really does enhance your hunting and
no doubt,
and definitely helps you, and you should definitely apply it. But like when I really think about it, I'm like 50, 60 years ago, no trail cameras, no thermal hub, let's make a mock scrape. Like, none of that. It was like, go out and hunt, and guys are killing giants still.
Oh, yeah.
So, just go out there and hunt.
Yeah, and again, I could listen here. If you could put 2-3 guys in front of me that are like, they swear by thermal hubs and they have all the bucks to prove it, I will listen. Seriously, I think anything that's got, when we're talking about deer, I freaking love it.
Yeah.
I could do it for the rest of my life. It's all I think about.
That's why we love doing this pod, not to cut you off, but that's why we love doing the podcast too, because we're able to get people on here who have
yeah.
like different views of like what like the Paul Patera podcast.
Yes.
You were there for
Yes.
that one, Adam. Like awesome talking to Paul and listening to him because he's super smart about it and that's the way he hunts.
Right.
I personally don't think I would hunt like that. Like maybe if I was in the right situation, I would apply it. But at the end of the day, I'm just going to go out there and hunt. But it's super interesting that he does that successessly. Like I love that.
Yeah,
That's really cool.
I completely agree. And I guess just to bring it back so it doesn't sound like I'm ranting or hating on thermal hubs, because I want to make it very clear.
Brad hates thermal hubs.
I absolutely do not hate thermal hubs
Get that
at all.
garbage out of here.
I just know that it's. I keep hearing it now. It's becoming a thing. I'm hearing it more and more, particularly just talking about thermals in general, which for bow hunters particularly, thermals absolutely do play a factor in your bow
Guy
hunting.
probably shoots single bevels too.
I absolutely do. I sure do. Grizzly stick samurais.
Let me guess, 50-pound draw weight.
But when it comes to tracking, for anybody that is because I only say this because I have a lot of people, because we have this ABB platform. You know what I mean? Like for whatever it is. I mean, to us it just feels like a couple buddies that like to talk about deer hunting, and we happen to make a podcast like anybody else could do. But I have had people that I know or loosely am acquainted to reaching out, and they're kind of saying how they're interested in tracking, and I just want to clarify, like don't be going tracking and worrying about whether or not it's rounded out and melted too much. Just keep in mind, as you get that experience, I couldn't tell you the first thing about the melt in a track my first year. Now I can look at it and just have a general idea that, that track actually has some age to it. I'm going to keep moving on this buck.
It's funny you say that. It just made me think of this, but for whatever reason, I don't know if it's just me and my like stubborn ways or what it is, but like when I first, obviously I listen to what everybody has to say, and I love taking in information, but there's something about me, like a lot of people are like, oh, go get Hal's book. And I'm like, no, I don't want to. Like, I know, like I always just wanted to
Too much.
Yeah, I always just wanted to go out there and like, hey, maybe it's screwing me over, and I that's why I haven't killed a buck, because I haven't read up on enough stuff about tracking, which I doubt. But I always just had something about me where I'm like, I just want to go out there and do it myself and make the mistakes myself and learn what I learned so I can hunt the way I need to on a track.
Absolutely.
And I don't know. I just think there's something to that, especially if there's someone new getting into tracking. Like, just go out there and do it. Like, we said it a million times. Like, there's so much information out there. It's really information overload at this point. Like, just go out and hunt.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah.
So
yeah, you can't just read up on everything and all of a sudden be good at it. You could read physics books or whatever the hell else you're supposed to read till you're blue in the face. Doesn't mean you know how to make a nuclear reactor.
Right.
You know what I mean? I remember years ago, you made me think of this. Years ago, prior to social media and all this, this is probably the dawn of social media. I'm probably 14, 15 years old, and I read maybe a Field and Stream magazine or something that talks about bow hunting the inside corner. And it's a whole article about how this gentleman has bow hunted the inside corner of fields. You hunt about 30 or 40 yards inside into the woods in the corner of that field, and that's where all the mature bucks like to travel before they come out in the field. Boy, I hunted more inside corners over the years, and I don't got a damn buck to show for it.
Oh, man, I love inside corners of field. I really do.
Here's the thing. Not because it doesn't work. Of course it works. Inside corners are great. It is a great place to set up on deer travel patterns. But I wasn't hunting.
Right.
I was going off what I read in an article, and I just ran to some random inside corner and said, oh, baby, here he comes.
Yeah, it's funny because, like I say about how I just started hunting, like, when I got Chance on camera, like, it just so happened he was on the inside corner of a field. I didn't know anything about the inside corner of a field. I'm like, there's giant bucks walking out here every night, and I set up there and shoot into them. I didn't kill them, but I shoot into them there. But, like, it's funny you bring it up because it was, like, the stereotypical inside corner of a field.
I mean, you could read Hal's whole buck, and then the first buck track you take goes into a barnyard beyond reasonable doubt, and, and you're just like, where's that book again? What am I supposed to do here? You just have to learn it for yourself.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Makes for a lot of fun, though.
Yes, tracking is the most fun way of hunting for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
It is. It's the most enjoyable I've been involved with.
I do say that, but I do really enjoy still hunting on bear ground too. We
Me
say
too.
it. We say it a lot. Like
Yep.
there is something about like not knowing anything. Like you don't know if there's, and then when you do see the deer, it's like, oh my god, there's a deer here. Where you're on a track and you almost kind of expect it to happen.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, I think what I just enjoy so much about all the tracking and everything that we've done that is involving hunting in the big woods and all that is just over the years when I was a child and even into my adult years now, because I mean, nothing's changed. I love it as much as I ever have. I love it more than I ever have. I
Yeah.
mean, my fire grows every year. But all the pictures that you would see of, like a Native American hiding behind a tree with a muzzleloader, and there's a big buck in the background, or the pictures you see of big giant, like a lot of them are paintings, like paintings of a buck, crossing what would look like an Adirondack stream, or
Right.
stepping out into a beaver meadow. That's why I love hunting the big woods, and I want to see those experiences in real time through my own eyes, and it hasn't even remotely fallen short. It's been everything and more that I hoped it would be. The things I've saw and the places I've been, and it's just been so enjoyable.
Yeah,
seeing bear tracks, seeing bears, seeing moose tracks. It's just
I was
awesome.
I was just gonna add to that, like when I started hunting the big woods, I never imagined like the love I would have for the mountains that I do have now. Like, dude, I love the mountains. I love them. Like, I can't wait. I'm thinking about tomorrow going and heading into the mountains just to go check cameras, just to be out there. I really got thinking about it the other day. I don't know why. I was sitting there editing on my computer, and I like took a break, and I'm like, I would kill to be out in the mountains right now. I'm like, when you're 4 miles out there, 5 miles out there, just nothing, and like all you can hear is birds maybe. It is the best thing in the entire world. It's undescribable.
It is. It just reminds you that this world still has quiet, wild places in it.
Right.
And it doesn't feel like that on a regular basis. It doesn't feel like that in our everyday lives.
No.
But there's places that are just untouched, unmolested by humans. And they're really special to be in. You can feel it, man. You can feel it in your spirit. You can feel it in the air. It's just the air tastes different, man.
It's funny when you follow like a true passion of yours, like what it leads, like what it brings into your life almost. Like when you're truly following a passion of yours, like doing it all the time, and like that is what you do, and you put all your work and effort into it. Like all the extra things that it brings into your life is crazy.
I feel bad for people that don't have what we have. At this passion.
Yeah.
I feel bad for people. I really do.
I think about it all the time.
I don't know where I would be in my life without hunting.
Yeah, me either.
It's the greatest thing. It's the greatest gift my father ever gave to me. Unknowingly, he just took me because I was an interested little boy and he enjoyed hunting.
Yeah.
But I was saying it earlier, we just kind of got in a conversation, but I go to bed thinking about hunting bucks in the mountains. I think about it all day when I wake up the next day, and it's just on a repeat process. And I know everybody listening to this feels the same way. Yeah. I think about hunting deer 24/7. It never leaves my mind. Never.
Same. I think about it every single day.
It consumes my mind. If you could do a pie chart of what my head thinks about on a daily basis,
well, we won't.
My wife would hate me. It'd be 1% wife and dog and 99% hunting.
Yeah, sorry about that, ladies.
I love you. But I know everybody feels the same.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Nope. So it's our way of life at this point.
Yeah, it is, and we get to share it with everybody else. And I listen to every other podcast just like everybody else does. We just happen to throw headsets on and like to chat about it ourselves.
Yeah, like I know we say that all the time. Like we always are constantly saying like we're just like anybody else. Like just throw a headset on and like, okay, you're doing the same thing we're doing. But like it's just funny. And you had mentioned something earlier. Like we'll have people reach out to us and like they'll like ask me a question.
Yeah, like I actually know. Like I don't know. I got lucky and shot a buck this year.
Dude, I haven't even shot a buck on the track yet. Like, don't ask me.
Yeah.
Like, all we're doing is bringing everybody along for our story and our adventure. Like, I don't know anything.
Yeah, Mark Sharon gave us, but he was saying it to me. You guys at Huntstock, you guys just weren't right there with us when me and him were chatting. But he gave me one of the nicest compliments for what we're doing here that I've received since we started doing it. And he just said that he appreciated our honesty. And he said it was very refreshing.
Yeah.
And I just want to always clarify it. I'll do it on every podcast. I don't give a damn. We are not here to sound like know-it-alls. If we sound like know-it-alls, I'm sorry. That's certainly not the intention. Sometimes I feel like I talk like a know-it-all, and it's not that. I'm just
passionate.
Yeah, I'm 32 years old. I'm pretty confident in my hunting abilities at this point. So at the end of the day, the only reason we're podcasting tonight is because I was working, and Bailey texted me and asked if I wanted to do a podcast tonight, and we asked Adam if he wanted to be in there too because we all wanted to see each other. So
yeah, I think it's like important for everyone to know that like I'm basically like I built this. Like I took the reins and like built this, and like you guys have been a part of it and helped me out like a ton.
Oh yeah.
And something that like
we're just the cast of characters, man.
Yeah.
You're the director.
Yeah, like something that I've really like prided everything that we do off of is that like we'll always remain true to ourselves and we'll always be honest about stuff. Like I don't ever want to if I got a whiff that it was like heading in the direction of like I don't
affecting friendships, affecting the hunting.
Yeah, or like even like the flashy like what you see on TV and stuff.
Not
like
gonna be me.
Not about that. Like that's not why I do it. Like I truly like first off I truly love making videos. And I love sharing it with people who have like common thoughts and have a common interest because that's awesome, dude. I remember before, like now it's kind of hard for me to like watch a lot of stuff on YouTube just because I'm constantly consumed behind the computer making our own videos and our own podcasts. So it's like really hard for me, but I still do. But I just remember before we did all this, I mean, dude, you guys remember we'd be sitting in the apartment and be like, did THP come out with a video tonight? Did THP come out with a video? And we'd throw it on and be so pumped, dude, because we loved watching their stuff because we could relate to it. And I'm like, now that I can do that, dude, that is the best thing in the world. Like that, I hope that I give somebody that. Like that is awesome. So that is why we do it. It's not about for, like clout or anything like that. It's just simply sharing our story and being relatable to people who do the same thing that we do.
Yeah, you know what's funny is my mom actually just said to me the other night, she goes, I loved your guys' podcast. It was great, yada, yada. And she goes, but I want you to know, I got thinking about it, and your father and his buddies, they were podcasting long before it became cool. And she said, you want to know what the difference was? They all sat around the kitchen table and drank beer, and all they did was talk about deer hunting.
Yeah,
and she said, and us wives would be in the living room with you kids, and they'd talk about deer hunting all night until it was time to go. I said, you know what, Mom? That was pretty insightful. I've never really thought about it like that.
Yeah.
But when I was a little boy, I was right there.
Right.
Listening to all of it.
Right. Now the cool thing about podcasts is like, because like, now in like today's age, like I guess it's just for like people who like do the podcast, I guess, but there's not like a lot of conversation in today's world, like face-to-face conversation. So that's the cool thing about podcasts is like, not only do we get together and do this, but like we also get to bring other people sometimes we don't even know, and we get to have actual conversations with people, and I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And then people get to listen to it, and it feels for them like they're right here listening to that conversation.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah, actually, we have somebody lined up, and we just won't say a name right now, just in case it doesn't pan out. But but there really would be no other time or opportunity for the most part that we would sit down with this person and have such an intimate conversation about something that we all enjoy. And that's what's been really cool about the podcast.
Can be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin Stone went from a guy that we kind of just saw on Instagram, saw he shot a couple nice bucks, knew he was a local guy, so we had him come do a podcast. We all shook hands in my front yard for the first time ever, put headsets on with a complete stranger. We literally said, hey, Kevin, what's up, man? Yeah, I shot a couple nice bucks, put the headsets on.
And now I talk to Kevin like a couple times a week.
I could text Kevin right now and he'd answer me.
Yeah.
It's just really cool.
It's funny, actually. I have a funny story. So when I met Zach Fehrenball,
yeah, which is just crazy. We used to watch those guys on TV. Yeah. It's just so fun to meet
well,
people.
I'll say this. I don't know if I've ever said this on the podcast before, but something that
be careful.
No. Something that I told these guys a long time ago, like before it was like right before we started doing the video thing. We always used to watch THP, and I told them, I'm like, we're gonna hunt with them one day.
Yep.
Remember that? I
remember that.
I said to them, I was like, we're gonna hunt with THP one day. They're like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, well, I was
Yeah,
definitely like,
right.
yeah, all right, bud.
And then
Dream big.
so and honestly, like,
Gonna go stock car race with Dale Jr. too.
yeah, exactly.
but anyways, so the first time I ever met Zach, this kid I've watched on TV, I think he's bigger than life, and
Yeah.
I'm like,
Hell of a deer hunter.
yeah, crazy deer hunter. And we're going up to meet. I'd never met John. I'd never met Brett, and I'd never met Zach. And we're gonna go meet them all in one swat of the hand. So we open the door, and Zach's like, "What's up, guys?" And we're like, I'm like standing there, like, "Oh my god." He's like,
I love you.
"Can I touch your hair?" he's like, "Yeah, you ever been on a podcast before with a stranger?" All right, good. Come on, boys. We went in there, and the second we met him, we jumped on the podcast, and I'm like, we have like 100 subscribers on YouTube, and right now I'm on the THP podcast.
I know. Dude, I feel all the time. I want people to know, like, I feel all the time like a poser, like a faker, dude. Like, I'm like, who am I to be on this platform, so to speak, where people, like, at least have, we're accessible, can listen to us.
Yeah.
But it's so true. And then, we do podcasts with people like Zach Farrenbaugh. We sat in a cabin up in the middle of nowhere as the snow was falling, talking with Zach Farrenbaugh.
Yeah,
The guy rode in my truck.
Yeah.
With me,
Yeah, back
I
from
had
dinner.
personal conversation with him.
Dude, Zach is.
It was awesome.
Yeah, Zach. I got to spend quite a bit of time with Zach when I was with Just Hunt Club, and he's the man.
I tell you what, though, you
He's the
shared that video for a buddy that recently had a birthday. Jason.
Oh, Jay Flynn.
And the best part about our videos is in that video, the best part about the fact that you're capturing things on videos is that it was in Kentucky last year when we turkey hunted.
Mm-hmm.
And when Jason is leaning up against the guard shack and he turns around and goes, "We'll be just a minute, y'all. Our computers are frozen." When he turned around and did that, dude.
Typical Jay.
Listen, it's not really. The point of this isn't that it's funny. Dude, I was back in Kentucky.
Yes.
I was back, dude. I was back in for like 2 seconds in my mind. 100%. I was right there in Kentucky, standing at that guard check because I had spoke to the woman that he was doing the impersonation. She had a thick Kentucky accent, sweet as sweet tea. You know. But wow, I was back again, and that's the best part about our videos, man.
Absolutely.
Is you get to be back there. Again.
So I obviously still have the hard drive from the first season we ever did filming.
Oh my god!
Actually, I'll have to bring it over one time. Like it's not even cringe. Like not even that. Like there's so much stuff on there that didn't make it onto YouTube.
That's probably so cool now.
Yeah, I look at it and I'm like,
The archives.
I didn't even remember that. I don't even remember that.
Keep it all, man.
Yep.
Keep all of it.
Yeah, I have it
Holy
all
crap.
double backed up. So
I'd give anything to see my dad when he was my age and his buddies hunting. Oh my god!
I mean, even
to be clued into
even
that.
a couple years ago, looking at you, like we all look different.
Oh my god!
All of us look different from
I
just
see
a couple
pictures
years ago.
from a year ago. I'm like, man.
Yeah. So if anyone's listening, we're going on a rant right now, just talking amongst each other. But like, if anyone's listening, take pictures, take videos. Like, like just do it because you're gonna look back and be like,
and take more video than you think is necessary. When you walk up on your buddy's buck and you guys are just sitting there and he's acting like a goofball and you're laughing and saying the craziest stuff, that all doesn't have to make it onto YouTube if you want to put it on there. But when you get to watch that 15-minute clip back just to yourselves, it means the world.
Yeah, John Lewis told me like one of the best. I mean, John Lewis told me tons of great advice. You know, as far as filming goes, like John's the man. He's the best, like greatest teacher with that stuff. And he told me he's like you always take more than you'll ever use. Yeah, and it's so true because like even when I'm that spilled over into my career now. Like I always take more than I need because when you're building it, you don't want to go, oh, I don't have that. Mm-hmm. And then you can't get it back. Mm-hmm. But it's the same thing like with us with like a deer. Like, oh, man, we didn't what I say to you, I'm very mad at myself that I didn't bring my big camera when we shot your buck. Yes. Because I can't get that back now. Yeah. We'll never get that back.
Yeah, and Corey videoed me in Virginia when I shot that bird with Corey, and he filmed me while I made that phone call to you, and he could have easily just cut the camera off because I'm just making a phone call to you. It really wasn't anything to put on YouTube, But to now see that video and get to see and listen back to your reaction when I call you and
Yeah.
see the conversation, it's just so much fun.
Awesome.
And
Brings you right back.
You just wouldn't think that anybody'd care to hear a phone call,
Yeah.
but I care.
Yeah.
I care to listen
Right.
to it.
Right, and part of us doing this is for us,
Yes.
honestly.
It
Like,
is
if we're being
definitely
honest.
for us.
So, man, that was a good one, guys.
Cool.
That
Yeah, that was
was a good one.
fun. That was
Yeah.
fun.
What are we at? What do you think we're at?
I'm gonna say we're at minute 15 or hour 15.
Hour 12.
Hour 12.
Hour 12.
All I know is that Adam brought some of them Benoit videos, and I'm ready to.
Yeah,
we're
this
gonna wrap
podcast
I'm not going to
up.
lie. About 15 minutes ago, and before we got into this good conversation, I'm like, man, those Benoit videos are sounding
They're gonna
good.
hit. They're gonna hit good.
I
Tonight.
want to see this waterfall buck everybody talks about that Lanny kills.
I've never
Stay tuned.
Just stay tuned.
I've never seen them, and Greg put me on blast on the Stagger podcast
Yeah.
for not seeing them.
Yeah.
two Lanny Benoit.
Greg, if you're listening to this, dude, you are one of my favorite guys to listen to on podcasts. I love you and Adam, but you are particularly one funny son of a bitch.
Dude, Greg's awesome.
Greg is.
Greg and I
funny.
sat when I
Greg
was
would
up,
have piled that spike horn.
And Greg, we met Greg at Huntstock too. Like when the crowd, like outside of everybody, like the visiting hours, so to speak, when it was just all the vendors there. Greg is the nicest guy, man. He's
he's
so
the best.
he's so friendly, and that dude could make conversation with a
Yeah.
wall.
yeah, him and I, the night I went up to Adams, I was supposed to film a podcast for him, didn't pan out, and Greg and I sat there. And before I even did the podcast with him, we just talked for like an hour and just
Yeah.
had the best conversation. I'm like, this dude is awesome.
Yeah, Greg is the man. And honestly, Greg, I know we're really getting on a rant now, but I love that you have no self-control when it comes to the little bucks. Dude, it's hilarious. I love it. You shoot all the little bucks you want, dude.
Well, Adam's like, yeah, Greg's good for spike horns and then booners.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, he shot one of the biggest bucks I've ever seen.
Yeah, giant. But all right, guys, thanks for listening. As always, go give us a like and follow on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, all under Adirondack Bucks and Beyond. Go check out Stagger Gear. Go to www.staggergear.com. Pick yourself up one of these vests or coats or gloves or whatever it may be, and use a code ABB to get 10% off your order. We'll catch you guys next time.